Now, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. This is the number one place where we unpack real stories, the strategies, and the mindset shifts that are behind the people who have redefined success on their real terms. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And if you've ever felt stuck in a high paying role that maybe looks good on paper, but feels completely misaligned on the inside, I think today's episode is going to hit close to home because our guest today helps ambitious professionals that are in high pressure corporate environments to find for themselves clarity, confidence, and direction. So they can actually stop performing success and actually live it. And I already know this is one of those conversations that you're probably going to want to send to that colleague or friend or sister or a brother that keeps saying, you know what, I'm fine, everything is okay, but you actually know they are not. So before you actually do that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and that way you're not going to miss out, first of all, on this episode, and you'd always know where to come back to for content like this, because we're not just here to inform you, we're here to empower you. Now, I'm really excited about today's guest. I don't know whether to say it in German or in English, or wait a minute, let's just say with the best way we can. We are joined by none other than Lisa Sennhauser-Kelly. Now, Lisa, willkommen to Online Prosperity Show. Did I get that right?
You got that right. Willkommen. That's welcome in German. Yes, you got that right. Thank you very much, Prosper. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. I can't wait to unpack what it is that you brought us. Even though I asked if you brought us any Swiss chocolate, and you were like, none for you, but I hope you're going to be delivering some goods and gifts and treats for our audience today.
I will. I hope so. I'll try. I brought some Swiss cheese and chocolate for my family, but sorry, Prosper, can't get it to you. Next time.
Absolutely. I hope I will make the list when you next visit. Now, for those that are tuning in for the very first time, Lisa is the founder and CEO of BlueSky Development AG. And this is basically a global leadership advisory who she, in her role, works across continents. And not only does she know what she's talking about, she's actually set in C-suite roles and now helps leaders step into their true authority.
Mhm.
Now, I could go on and talk about things I'm not even qualified to talk about. But Lisa, I just have to ask you this. I mean, you came from obviously a chartered accounting and accounting background, which is basically in and around high pressure corporate environments, and now you're coaching leaders to find themselves. I want you to let us know where, at what point did spreadsheets turn into, let's start unpacking your identity.
Very good. Thank you very much, Prosper. Yeah. So I guess a little bit about my background. I am originally from Australia, and I moved with KPMG to Switzerland a long time ago, 35 years ago. So I had the opportunity to go there. It was to do audits in a different year end, basically. And I loved it because I grew up in Bright, Victoria. I grew up skiing. And in Switzerland, I had the chance to go skiing at the weekends. That was the main attraction. But I loved it there, and I applied to come back. So Switzerland became home all those years ago. And I I loved the accounting. I moved from one company to another. I ended up going to America for a couple of years and then coming back to Switzerland and joining UBS. And in UBS, that's the global bank, I prospered, I thrived. I was really fortunate enough to be promoted, but only after I really found my own authenticity. And so I think for many years, having lived in Australia and the US and Switzerland, I was often trying to be someone else. I was trying to be, it was a very male-dominated world. I was trying to be a man. And I was also trying to fit in, trying to be Swiss, trying to change my behaviors to fit in. And if we're not working to our strengths in alignment with our core values and also to our preferences, I wasn't bad at spreadsheets, right? But it's not a preference. So we need to work with our strengths and authentically. And I think at some point I realized that I didn't realize all of that. I didn't know that. I just realized that I sort of gave up. I thought it was not working anymore. I gave up and I thought, I'm going to leave. And so I have nothing to lose. And so I started to be myself. And your self is stronger. Whatever that self is much stronger than trying to pretend that you're someone else. And so this was a huge epiphany for me. I ended up staying, but I started to get success because by being myself, I was performing better and I had success. And so I think that was the clinch. And I also had the fortunate chance to meet one of the world's best coaches. That's Marshall Goldsmith in the United States, often ranked as the number one coach globally. He was at a leadership development conference that we had in the States, and that was when I was sort of woken up to what coaching was. I hadn't even realized at that time. And I realized that if I can't change other people's behavior, but I can change my own behavior and get a different response from others. And so I started doing that in the working world, in the corporate world, and it was so powerful that I started to explore what is coaching, what is leadership development, and I basically retrained outside the bank.
Absolutely. And congratulations. I'm still hung up on the no chocolate though, because you've stayed there long enough to have had some that are just hanging in your bag somewhere. We're gonna have to empty those pockets. But Lisa, thank you so much for giving us this sort of background, because it really gives us a glimpse into your start. Now, you did say spreadsheets were not a preference. When you were in Bright, what was the aspiration? Was it accounting? What is it that you wanted to do as a kid?
I don't think I don't think anyone ever grew up wanting to be an accountant. Right? That's my first assertion. Potentially, but not really. I liked making notes and, keeping records and things like that, writing. I think the schooling, I went from Bright to Ballarat in school, and I think the schooling led us at that time toward getting a job. You could go on and get a degree, but you needed to get a job. And so I went on to banking, and I worked at the Commonwealth Bank in Australia for 5 years. And during those 5 years, I was quite young, I think, when I started, 16. I did my studies part-time. I did my what was called the HSC at the time, and my university. I started part-time and then I finished it full-time in Australia. And then after university, I went to KPMG because they came and asked. It wasn't really, I don't think I ever really had a plan. It just sort of evolved. I went along, good girl, going to school, doing what you have to do, trying to save money, getting an education. I just followed along. And so I ended up in a career as an accountant. I ended up with this great chance to go to Switzerland. I had fun. Life was good. I was always with other professional people. It felt great. But it gets to a point where you're kind of not, it gets to a point, in my case, I wasn't thriving anymore. I did it well. I was a managing director for my last 5 years at UBS, which required several promotions, right? It doesn't just come, especially not to a woman at that time, and certainly not from a woman who wasn't Swiss German. And so you have to basically perform. Performance is always key, but you have to be seen to be performing. So you have to be sure that you get the visibility and the credibility for the work that you do. Performance is not enough.
Right. And thank you so much for that, because I mean, I was beginning to get worried because, last Halloween, Lisa, I asked my little girl what she wanted to be, and she said she wanted to be a witch. So I'm was just hoping that's not a career choice, and that she at least should have known what she wants to do. So you've just calmed me down a little bit, that when they're growing up, they don't quite know. It will change with time as it happens. Now, as speaking of change and things of that nature, you not only did you change the environment and the career choice, you literally went to a whole different continent. And I was joking around speaking in German, but obviously that's a whole different language, way to live, way to eat, and things of that nature. Now, tell us what it was like for you, especially with that culture shock, and also having to deal with what you were, talking about, the performance side of things.
Yeah. And I think human beings are amazingly flexible. We learn and we adapt. And that's a good thing, but our strengths are our weaknesses. Our ability to adapt becomes, it can create challenges. And living in Switzerland, I always enjoyed it. I think in the first 3 months, it was just fantastic, skiing every weekend, meeting new people. And then reality starts to set in. Everyone speaks English. That's what they told me. And of course, until you wanted to do something like get insurance for your car, get a car, buy a car, you're not having that conversation in English. And so, or, send something back home through the post office, so everyone speaks English until you wanted to do something difficult. And so learning Swiss German, even though I'm a chartered accountant, I've also done banking education since then, I can price options. But learning Swiss German was the hardest thing that I've ever had to learn. And I think because I had never learned another language as a child. And so it was my first second language. And I think learning as an adult it's a different part of the brain than we learn as a child, a language. And so it was difficult and I was determined and I did. But I did it mainly so that I could live more comfortably, get things done in Switzerland. I was
Right.
fortunate enough that in the corporate environment, you can work quite well, quite long in English without learning the local language.
Absolutely. Now, you'd already had a bit of an experience, in the Commonwealth corridors. And what was it like in the KPMG corridors in this corporate culture? And I've had a bit of experience with German, and there's a whole different way of time and precision and the way things are done. What was your experience in this space?
Yeah, I don't want to sort of start making rash statements about different cultures, but I moved first to Switzerland, and Switzerland is quite conservative, reserved culture. Yes, people are absolutely on time. Everyone is it's the Swiss watch timing. Everyone is on time. It's quite a disciplined culture and reserved. I then went to the US, to the east coast of the US, to Baltimore, Maryland, and again, a completely different culture. And interestingly enough, I realized I actually felt more at home moving from Melbourne to Zurich than from Zurich to Baltimore. Isn't that interesting? I was surprised, even though there was no language issue. Again, just a different culture. I think in Melbourne, we're also quite conservative, to be fair. And Melbourne is quite a cultural city, and I think a lot of European culture exists in Melbourne. And
Right.
so, yeah, it was generally a good experience, but I know from all of my coaching clients now, most of my coaching clients, not all, are are expats coming from somewhere else, moving to Switzerland, or they've gone from perhaps Switzerland to somewhere else because my clients are around the world, but they're often living outside their own culture. And it has an extra element. It's just an extra layer of hardship. And so the hardship comes from, as human beings, we need certain things, right? We need self-esteem. That's a little bit impacted by living outside your own culture. We need a sense of control. It's harder to control things when you don't know how they work. We need a sense of direction. That might be a little bit unclearer because perhaps we don't know how long we'll be here. We don't know what the next career step is or where it is. And the big one for living outside your own culture that we need is this sense of belonging, community. And I think what happens is, as an expat, we move from one place to another. We end up losing some elements of our community, whether it be family, friends. It could simply be perhaps in your home country, you were in the choir, right? It could be you were in your home country in a football club or, a dance troupe. And so I encourage my clients who are succeeding, often succeeding in the corporate world, they come to me because of a work issue. The issue might be the boss, but the real issue underlying is they might be very uncomfortable because they've moved to a different country. They don't really fit in and they need to find that tribe again. We are tribal. We need to find our tribe. And I think this is key. And we also need to have fun. And sometimes living in a different culture, it's a different type of fun.
Absolutely. And I like how you highlight that because, I mean, not only are you talking from the outside, you're somebody who's actually been in the planes and been in those particular spaces. And I've realized one thing about traveling. Wherever you arrive, you are by definition a rookie. You are starting from scratch. You don't have a place to stay. So if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, your
Yeah.
psychological needs are taken away from you, your safety needs are taken away from you, the love and belonging. So it's like climbing the ladder all over again. Now we're looking at people like yourself that are high ranking executives where you are coming from, and you are having to start from the bottom again. And I think that cognitive dissonance is very hard for people to sort of comprehend. I mean, I don't know, maybe you want to add something to that?
You said it perfectly. You absolutely said it perfectly, Prosper. It's a cognitive dissonance. And the people, they're high performing professionals who are used to succeeding. And it just feels a little bit different in a different environment. And so it's easy to blame or to attribute the discomfort to the company, to the boss, to the issues that you have at work. But it's often related to the issues outside work. And sometimes we can sort those out and go back to work quite comfortable and happy. Sometimes we need to look at the environment at work and see whether that's meeting their needs.
Absolutely. Now, I've heard this from a few people, including even Marshall Goldsmith that you've referenced. And I was looking behind to see if I've got a book, and he's got a book that says, "What got you here won't get you there." All right.
Yeah.
So you would have been taken into an environment based on your credentials and the person that you were in that particular space. But to then go to where you want, there's that gap in between. And I suppose this is the gap you help people feel, or
Absolutely. It's a very important piece of work, that book. He's got lots of books, at least 10. I love them all, but that one's a very important one, and I do also reference it a lot. So thank you for bringing that up. This refers to everything in a person's career. So generally, when we start out, we have to work hard. We have to perform. Performance always matters. Whatever it is that you're doing, you have to do it well. You have to deliver.
right.
That's the basic. What enabled you to deliver when you're younger was working long hours, probably, a lot of discipline and really, demonstrating that you can do that. But that won't take you further. People get to a point where they start leading teams and they're still doing the hard work. They're still working the long hours. They're still trying to do everything themselves. They have to stop doing and start being. And so being a leader. And so that's about empowering others and instead of being the one who's great at spreadsheets or great at actually producing results, whatever those results are, you have to be the one who's great suddenly at leadership. And often there's not enough leadership training. And so it's about helping people realize that. And, when I speak about leadership, it's not about hierarchy, it's about getting others to follow. And so, for an example, you're leading me in this call, and I'm leading you. We're both leading, and there's no hierarchy. You spoke about your child. Not sure how old.
Oh, she's going on 6 now. Yeah.
And she's leading you. You're leading her, and she's leading you, right? So there's no hierarchy, right? And so leadership is about influencing and persuasive and getting others to follow. It's about creating behaviors. It's about moving things forward. And so, in order to grow in your career, you have to become a leader, first of all, of yourself. You have to know who you are. and you have to know what your strengths are and your preferences, and the most important thing, what your values are, because we can't sustainably work outside our own values. We cannot do that. And so you have to know, you have to lead yourself first, and then you lead others. And that can be people in your team. It certainly is your line manager. You have to lead your line manager. You have to lead your peers. You have to lead people in other teams. People that you need to get things from. They might be delivering things, or people that your clients, you're leading clients. A salesman is leading their clients. The clients are leading the salesman. And so I see leadership as always a relationship. It's about relationships. And so in order to succeed, you have to be good at building relationships with everyone. And that's what I consider leadership. And then that's leadership, relational leadership. And then the third level is systemic leadership. And that's when you're leading systems. And so that's a different level altogether, but the people that I'm working with are moving up through those levels. And what you mentioned, what got you here won't get you there. It's always that. You have to grow in yourself to take it to another level.
Mm. Now, Lisa, I've done all the paperwork that needs to be done. I've done all the coursework. I've attended all the seminars and things of that nature. Why would I need to keep engaging in any of this? We're just meeting these people for what, 8 hours during the day, and why should I be bothered?
Why should you be bothered developing your relationship skills? Is that the question?
Absolutely, because then this looks like it's yet another thing I have to attend or do and be engaged with.
Yeah. It depends on what you want,
Mm.
right? And so generally we're working toward a goal. We're in a corporate environment. We might have our own objectives. We might have corporate objectives. We might have things that we need to deliver on. And generally in these matrix organizations, it's not the case that if you do your part right, it's enough. So usually you're relying on someone else. You need to get them to deliver. It's about getting other people to deliver their part to get your part done and to, be able to get the results that the organization needs. And, I talked about values before. What you value in a corporate sense should hopefully be what the company values as well. If you can't get alignment on that, it's going to be hard to get your job done, right? But if you can, where you have a problem with someone in another team, someone who might be getting in your way, preventing you from achieving your results, try and look and see what are they valuing in the moment? What are you valuing? And it could be, you know, the outcome that you need, or it could be that you're valuing status, or that they're valuing status or power or something like that. What are you valuing in the moment and what are they valuing? And so a coach can help you with that to see through what you're actually doing that is creating perhaps an uncomfortable environment for someone else, or what they might be doing, which is making it uncomfortable for you. And if
Mm.
you can get alignment on what you value, which is hopefully the corporate goals, hopefully, you should be able to get agreement on how to get there.
There's no skipping this because if we don't go past the internal, whatever results that we're going to produce are going to be obviously misaligned, like you said, with the values of the company and us as a person. Now,
Yeah.
do you think a lot of high performers secretly know this, but it's hard for them to admit, or they're maybe too afraid to admit it because then it actually then showcases that there's yet another thing they don't know. And I know there's a lot of people that don't want to be in that position.
Yeah, I mean, this is vulnerability, right? So they don't, people, including me, before I realized I had to be myself. You think that you're sort of in this role and you're acting and you have to do this and do that because that's what the people are doing. You try and be a good corporate person, but unless you're really living your own values, you will not do it well. And
Mm.
so sometimes we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to show that we are not this corporate perfect role model, but nobody is. But if we can demonstrate vulnerability, also if you have a team, to others in your team, if we can demonstrate vulnerability and say, I really think that we should go against this current trend that we're doing and do it this way because that's what I believe in, that can be a sign of weakness, or it can be consider you might be afraid that you'll be punished for this something. But if we can show who we really are and live to that, we will be stronger because others might feel the same way and they won't know it until they hear it. And so if you can demonstrate vulnerability, which can look like weakness, people believe it's weakness, it's actually a leadership superpower. So
Mm.
there's two. There's empathy, if you can demonstrate empathy, if you can be empathetic, and demonstrate vulnerability. These are both leadership superpowers. And so a coach can help a leader, everyone is a leader. A coach can help a leader identify, where they could be stronger on those things, where they could demonstrate it in a better way.
You define this as being in a golden cage, and
Yeah.
I'm just envisioning, everything is nice and rosy. It's all petted. You nice. They're sending you all the drinks and the food that you want so much that you forget to see that this is just a golden cage at the end of the day. Could you, because fish don't see the water that they swim in, could you maybe paint a picture for us, especially maybe looking at your own journey, what makes it feel like a cage, even though on the outside everything looks like you're successful and
Yeah, I mean, especially potentially, especially in financial services,
right.
in Switzerland, we are really well paid, right? And so, as a managing director at a global bank like UBS, I was extremely well paid. I earned it. I worked enormous
Drinks on
hours.
you then, Lisa. Drinks on you then.
Um, and I made the decision. I said, I'm going to leave the corporate world before I turn 50. I made that decision, and it's a huge decision. And so I was not thriving. So what does that mean? I was doing work that I understood. I did have self-esteem. I had a sense of control. I just a lot of the things I didn't agree with. There were things related to decisions that were being made, compensation that was being paid, a lot of things that I simply just didn't agree with. It didn't sit with me. And I'm very independent. One of my core values is independence, and I wasn't independent. And I think at the time, through the global financial crisis, there was the need for everybody to be a little bit of a soldier. So I couldn't be entrepreneurial in that role. And so I had a lot, but I didn't have enough. I wasn't thriving. And so I wanted to be independent, and that was a core need. But I had to hire a coach and said, your job is to help me leave. You get 3 sessions. You have to help me to leave the bank. I also hired a lawyer to try and make sure that I left in a sensible way. You
Wow.
know, if you quit, you lose a lot of options and things like that. And so I hired a lawyer to help me to leave in a sensible way. And the coach was amazing, made me realize essentially that my fear was leaving the golden cage. I had good income. I had a fear of losing that money. And so they helped me. They said, as an accountant, you should be able to do this. Do a budget. What's your budget? And I said, I don't want to do a budget. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know. And
Okay.
so the coach helped me to create my budget. And realistically, you have to accept that you're not going to change your lifestyle that much. You don't want to, so you've got to put the budget, you've got to be realistic. We want some things that we currently have. And so we have to forego other things. So did a budget brutally, then realized I had to stay 2 more years. I had to stay 2 more years before I made that call. And so during that 2 years, I retrained as an executive coach, did all of the training, all of the certifications and everything so that I had a good start when I started. And, you know, I'll be blunt, definitely not earning anywhere near. And some years, it's tough, right? And all the coaches out there will tell you it's a tough environment for coaches. There's a lot of coaches on the market. And so it is hard to distinguish yourself. It is hard to show yourself through the clutter. But I'm happy. I'm thriving. I'm not earning anywhere near what I was earning, but I was unwell from the stress and from the misalignment of my core values. about some of the things that we were deciding and doing, some of the things that we were doing with employees. You go through one restructuring phase after another, right? Some of the things with some of the decisions that we were making essentially. And so if you have to be in alignment totally with your values, with whatever you do. And like you, what you're doing here, Prosper, you're helping me and you're helping other people, your audience, to grow. That's so fulfilling, right? It's so fulfilling. You're giving every day. And I feel the same way. I'm hopefully giving something to people every day. This is what makes us happy. This is the definition of happiness.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate that, because for some people, I'm working right now, this is me excited and everything else. And if this is every single day with no stress, no cortisol, up and down, yes, there's the sacrifice of not having the corner office, the
Yeah.
big salary and everything else, but at least I get to sleep at night and I
Yeah.
get to watch my kids grow. And it's things like that that I don't think some people would actually be able to say that. And speaking of being able to say that, you literally had to plan this escape from this golden cage, and it involved lawyers and coaches and things of that nature. But what does it say about the level of risk that somebody has to undergo, or awareness that they have to undergo, in order for them to actually untangle themselves from this?
Yeah. I think, is it a real level of risk or is it an imaginary fear, like a limiting belief? You know, did I, was it a real issue or not? That's what we don't know. And so a coach can help you to work out whether your fears or your concerns or your objections, whether they're real or not. And so sometimes we're telling ourselves untruths. We imagine things. And, you know, it's not black and white. Nothing is black and white. It's never binary. And I'm often helping, people when they're making decisions, whether it's a decision about staying or leaving or changing jobs or changing something in the way that they work, anything, any decision. It's never black and white. I always say there's always seven solutions. What's the next one? What's the next one? What's the next one? Maybe they only get to five, but there's certainly more than three. It's never binary, right?
Mm.
And so we have to explore and think, what else can I do? What else is there? And sometimes the answer is to stay, right? It's not everyone is caged in a golden cage, not at all. Sometimes the right decision is to keep with the current salary because you need it for children's education or something, but then you have to tweak something within the work environment to make it sustainable. And so that's one of the alternatives. What can I tweak? What has to change? What can I
Mm.
do differently?
Absolutely. And you mentioned the statement that has stuck with me now. You say yourself is stronger. When you discover yourself, this is one of those things that is the biggest gift that you can give to first of all, your own self, and even the people that are around you. How did
Mm.
how did that feeling sort of, come to you? And once you realize that, authenticity was your real advantage, what was the sort of feeling that people would have? Because some people have never really experienced that.
Yeah, I mean, this was huge. It's about being, Gandhi calls it congruent.
Congruent, yeah.
I wasn't congruent.
Mm.
And so I was, thinking one thing and doing something else, basically. And so we need to be congruent. And so I'm not sure if Gandhi says this, but this is what I bring it down to is we have to know what our core values are. And my three core values, and you have many, but you have ones that are really core to you. And I like to bring things down to threes because it's easier to remember. But independence is one of mine and fierce independence. I need to be independent. I cannot be financially dependent on my husband because of my independence value. I cannot be dependent on the bank that I worked for the same reason. And so a fierce independence. Another one is fairness. And it's often people who've come from some sort of disadvantage, and the only disadvantage, I'm very privileged. The only disadvantage, if I have one, is being female, right? And so it definitely was for many years of my career. I can write a book about this. I've got lots of anecdotes. And so that's the only disadvantage I have. And I think people who have had any sort of disadvantage have fairness as a value because they notice when it's not there. And so fairness is one of my core values. And the third one is integrity. And it sounds simple and it sounds too broad, but it is what it is. And I think this is why partly why you become an accountant because you're interested in getting things right or being accountable, responsible, reliable. But it's come through my whole career. And I did have after I left the bank, I left the corporate world before I turned 50. I became a coach, and then they asked me to come back and be CFO of a spin-off of the bank. And I said, no, I'm busy, I'm a coach. And then I met the chairman of the board and a very amazing person. He was the CEO of Dyson, the
The,
vacuum cleaner
the vacuum
company
cleaners. Yeah. Okay.
for many years, and a marketing genius. And I thought, he's the chairman of the board. Okay, I'd love to learn from him. And I thought, I'll do it for 2 years. It's a gig. I'll do
Mm,
it for 2 years. And so I did this CFO gig for 2 years. I learned so much. I learned from private equity professionals because they bought the company and then resold it. I learned so much from them, and it was a great opportunity. But one of the things that happened as CFO, we had a conversation at one point with the private equity guys, and they asked me to do something, on a conference call, and I said, "No, I can't do that." And they said, "What? We would expect that you'd be able to do it." And then I said, "Look, I've only got one asset, and that's my integrity, and I can't do that." And so this is what I mean with values. We have to know them, own them, embrace them. They
mm,
are our strength, but they're also our weakness, right? And then we have other strengths. And so, was it a weakness? Of course it is. If you're saying no because of your one of your values, that can get you into trouble. But it didn't make me feel unwell. And
mm,
so I felt strong, you have to know what they are. And so when I'm working with people, I help them identify their values. And that's like a formula for decisions. Is this decision in alignment with my values? Is
mm,
this, and then it's values, strengths, and preferences. Is this decision in alignment with my core strengths? Like, am I doing a job where I'm using not only my core strengths, something I know how to do, but also something that I enjoy doing?
mm.
Right? Because it's a subset. The preferences is a subset of the strengths. And so
Absolutely.
this is key. Values, you
Okay.
cannot you cannot sustainably do a job which is outside your core values. You cannot also work for a line manager who doesn't have aligned core values. They might not be the same, but they can't be contradictory to your own core values.
Absolutely, absolutely love that. And while you were talking, I was actually just thinking because my values are to leave, to learn, and to contribute. And for me to be able to live the best life, I need to learn how to do that. I'm learning from people like yourself, everybody that comes on the show, and things of that nature. And the contribution you've already mentioned what that looks like. And I feel like you're also doing that. You obviously, have lived that life, you've experienced it, and things of that nature, and you've gone on and you learned from the lawyers. Even during that CFO gig, you went in because now you're aligned with who you are and you have an understanding of what you require out of
Yeah.
it. It was easier to handle because that's something that you now know. Why am I in this for? It's no longer about the golden cage, and now you're sending the elevator down for those that are on their way up so they can learn, and that's in the form of contribution. You now help other leaders find their authority. What does that mean for those that are just coming across this whole new swing of words, values, and all the nice Swiss chocolate that you didn't bring for us?
So these nice words, I didn't know these words either, right? I had to learn all of this. And I think it's really empowering for people if they really know themselves and what they want. Because what we're often doing is we're judging others, but we need to judge ourselves first, right? And say, am I living the best life that I can live for me? And is that working for me? And if it's not working, we have to tweak something. And it's as simple as that. It sounds simple, it's not so simple, right? So get a coach. Everybody needs a coach. And, honestly, everybody should do coaching training. It's really valuable. It helps you, even if you never use it as a coach, it helps you with whatever work that you do, I would say. And you've clearly done a lot of coaching training, Ross. And so, so it helps you with whatever work you do, in a corporate environment as well. It helps you with your relationships with other people.
Absolutely. And you see, the way you talk is, I speak to a lot of coaches every single day, and each and every one of them is coming from a whole different environment. So, when I was growing up, I was always told the statement, if you hang around a barbershop long enough, soon you'll have a haircut. I mean, if you have been around people that speak in the same language as you do, and you read the books that I have been immersing myself in, I mean, it would take a stick to not even want to change, in the right direction. Now, speaking of you helping others and others finding coaches, what sort of programs or incentives are you giving to people that would then want to work with you, or what do people get when they work with you?
Yeah, I have. I'm generally doing one-on-one coaching, so I help people individually, and they can be at any stage of their career. So I help them, get a leg up, get those promotions, see the way, right? But I
Mm.
also help the very senior ones in doing their job properly. And so I kind of thought when I went into this, I'm going to change the corporate world, make it better, one leader at a time, right? And so it's a slow process, right? But so I do work one-on-one with leaders at all levels, including the C-suite. But all leaders, I have no preference. It's a lot of fun for me, whichever level somebody is at. But I also have group programs, and I talked to before about we have the inner authority, the leading the self. We have the organization impact, which is leading others. And then we have the systemic impact. And so I have three programs at those levels. The third one is, to be honest, just one-on-one mainly. If you're doing systemic impact, it's usually one-on-one. But I have programs, group programs, and in group programs, I can only highly recommend them because you learn from the others in the room. And so the others in the room are at the right level. There are only up to six people in a group, and you learn from them as well as from the coach. And so it's leading yourself. So it's inner authority. I call them, the programs are called Authentic Leader, Inner Authority, Authentic Leader, Organization Impact. And so the
Mm.
first one is leading yourself, and I highly recommend you do that first. And the second one is leading others. And for the third level, systemic impact, happy to arrange a group program, but generally doing it one-on-one. Nobody wants to be in a group at that level.
Absolutely.
They should, though. They should. They should, because it's better. Yeah.
Great stuff. I mean, obviously, you would understand this analogy that, when you point a finger at somebody, you're only pointing at them with the one finger, but three of them are pointing back at you, which means you seriously need to do a lot of work on yourself in order for you to be able to then, be able to lead. Now, what I'm hearing from what you're saying, Lisa, just let me know if I'm wrong with this, is your life story, your experience, your whole entire journey has just been about permission. And it's been permission to stop performing, permission to stop adapting, and permission to actually just be yourself in environments that actually reward conformity. We were talking about the golden cage, earlier on. And now you're literally giving that permission back to other leaders, and you're literally tapping them on the shoulder and telling them it's your turn to lead. Now,
Yeah.
if somebody's watching this right now and felt that tap, and they really want to connect with you and find out how much, or not how much, how they can actually start working with you, and they've heed to that calling, where can they go to on the internet to find you, Lisa?
Yeah, I have a website. It's www.mybluesky.ch. CH is for Switzerland. So
Um,
my blue sky. And that's because, I come from Australia. The sky is very big and very blue, and it's really important to me. And it's also about blue sky is also about horizons,
Mm.
growth and horizons and building and, blue sky thinking and all of those things. And so that's why it's called mybluesky.ch. I think that's the easiest way, and you can see there how to work with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes below and definitely direct people your way. Now, Lisa, I can't thank you enough for the time that you spent with me on the call today. I mean, what you are doing and helping other people, I feel like you're literally giving people back to themselves, because if you are just wandering in those corridors and you don't quite understand why you were there, why now, and why should anybody care, people are just literally being, as Zig Ziglar says, wondering generalities that just don't necessarily understand. And there you are showing them the light and then saying, this is the way home and things like that. But now that you've brought us into your world, you did hint on a book that you could write and things like that. What's next? What are you working on that we should be excited about?
Oh, I will write a book one day, but it's probably a little way off. But
Sure.
what I am excited about at the moment is I started doing leadership roundtables,
Okay.
and they're actually free. And so they are by application because I want to have a good group. But please, if you're unsure, do just apply, because I love to meet all people, anyway. But the leadership roundtables are free, and we pick a topic and we explore it. And I'm just facilitating, and the people are bringing the content, and it's fantastic. And so, you can see those on my website as well. I'd love
Absolutely.
to get some different leaders from I'd love to get some Australians onto my leadership roundtables. I'll make them at a more friendly time zone, time, and then maybe some Australians will join. Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad we caught you on this leg of your travels, and I really appreciate the time you took with me today on the call, Lisa.
Thank you, Prosper. It's been a real pleasure. Totally.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Now, for those that are watching, if you're somebody who's maybe navigating leadership, corporate pressure, or just maybe questioning your next move, I think Lisa isn't just talking theory. She's been there. She's been in those corridors that you keep walking to every single day without you discovering your own true, authentic self. As she's actually setting the seats you're sitting in, made those decisions that you're afraid to make, and went on and built a life that actually aligns with her values, not just her CV. Now, that's a very different kind of guidance. This is somebody who knows what they're talking about, not necessarily just smoke. All right. So if this conversation made you pause a little bit, or you felt that proverbial tap on the shoulder that I was talking about, even for a single second, this is your signal. Okay. We used words that you may have not heard in a very long time spoken in a short episode plus commercials. So, like I said, this is your signal, because the real cost isn't staying in the wrong role. It's actually staying there knowing it is not good for you. And I think Lisa has just shown us that success without alignment is yet another form of pressure that we can actually relieve ourselves off of. So I'm going to be leaving all those links in the show notes so that you can actually start your journey, see what it is that you can do in order to gift yourself that authentic leadership and that personal, accountability, so you too can be, do, and have a happier existence. I could go on and on, but I think if you have watched this and you're watching right this moment, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any of these important conversations that we have on the Online Prosperity Show. But until next time, bye for now.